Hello, welcome back, Therapy Talkers. This is Pauline, and that's my buddy over there, Tammy. And so, as y'all can tell from the title, today we are going to talk about grief and loss. And so, before we get into it, just know that grieving is a process and is very much individualistic, meaning that we have our own way as individuals that we're going to grieve, and meaning that, like, the way I grieve is going to look differently from the way Tammy grieves, but that doesn't mean we're not grieving. And so while you're here, hit like, hit subscribe, and share, please. So this content was basically a request from a therapy talker, and so we created it, and we're gonna just get right into it. But before we get right into it, we need to check in, Tammy. And so something I want to check in differently with you today.
Oh, what are we gonna do?
What am I gonna do? So, affirmator cards.
Oh, yes. We've been doing that on our socials.
So this is one way I like to start sessions with. What's up?
I have a grief and loss deck of cards. I should have gotten those out. I can see them across the room.
It's okay. Maybe
time.
you can.
We'll do it another time.
You can. Yeah, you can totally make set some posts of your cards.
Yes.
But this is what I picked out today. Let me read it.
Can you read it? Yep.
It says, "No judgment. I release myself from any and all judgment. I find my inner critique, call into my office, and I tell it to take a vacation. As it leaves the room, I let out a sigh and begin to enjoy the joy of simply being." Who hired that guy anyway?
I love that. Those cards are so much fun.
They are.
It's fun that we both have it. I mean, I didn't know you had it. You didn't know I had it. And speaking of that, we have matching Easter nails.
Yes.
Yours are nice and long. Mine are nice and short, but that's so much fun.
Thera twins.
Thera twins. I like it.
Thera twins. Yes. I love it.
Anyway, that was a good affirmation. I love it. So today we are going to talk about grief, like Pauline said. So please stay to the end to learn all about grief, because if you haven't gone through it, you will eventually go through it or know somebody who's going through it. So, and again, like Pauline said too, this topic was brought to us by somebody who requested it. So if you have something you want us to chat about, we will listen. So let us know, hit us up. So today we're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about the 5+1 stages of grief and symptoms and treatments, and maybe just have a little bit of a dialogue too, because Pauline and I like doing that because we're buddies. So anyway, Pauline, can you tell us what is grief exactly?
Okay, well, I'll make it short and simple. And this is coming from the American Counseling Association. And they basically say grief is a natural reaction to loss or change. Natural meaning it happens to everyone. And so what is loss, Tammy?
Gosh, when we're talking about this, I think we're going to interchangeably talk about grief and loss because they are really together. We're talking about losing somebody is grief, and that's more what we're going to be talking about and focusing on. But there's so much more. Loss is maybe losing a relationship. Loss could be like maybe you had a vacation planned and you couldn't because of COVID. It could be a painful separation from somebody who you love and they moved away. Loss of a pet, loss of a home, loss of like 2020. A lot of us feel like we lost that whole chunk of our life. So loss can be really anything. But so we're going to intermix when we talk more about grief. But I want you to remember that it's a lot about just loss in general. So Pauline, as I was thinking about this and thinking about grief and loss and what we're talking about, a lot of times people struggle with what they think they should say, what they think they shouldn't say. And I know we don't have the perfect solution for everybody's grief or loss, but do you have any suggestions on our therapy talkers on what they can say instead of maybe something else?
Yes, and I have a confession to make. I think there's an expectation for therapists to always know what to say and always like have the right answer. And for me, I share this with my clients, but the the hardest, most difficult sessions for me is when a client has lost someone or something. And trying to find the right words to say for me is very difficult. Like in any other situation, I know what to say, but with loss is very difficult. And being in a space with a client who's like expressing their loss and grieving while we're in session. Yeah. So here are some examples. This is what we say, and I think we mean well. However, maybe there's a different way to say it. So rather than say stay strong, which is very common, maybe instead you can say let it out. Just strength is very different, and not letting it out or not crying isn't really strength. You're stuffing it. Maybe rather than saying it will get better, you can say it's going to be hard until it gets better. Because we don't necessarily know when that time would be, but we can just put it out there and say, yeah, definitely acknowledge the hardship of it, and also just put it out there. At some point, it will get better. Ooh, this one. Rather than say time heals all wounds, because we don't really know, right? Maybe you can say you're grieving might go away someday. Or maybe you're grieving, the intensity of it will decrease. It might not necessarily go away completely, because we're going to be reminded. Anniversaries are going to happen. You're going to see certain things that belongs to them. You're going to be reminded. And so you're going to experience something again. Let's see. Oh, they are in a better place.
Ooh, I hear this one a lot. Yeah.
Yes. And again, we mean well in what we're saying. We're trying to comfort people, right? So instead of saying that, you can say something along the lines of honor their time, honor their life while they were here. So basically, remember them by what they've done and your time that you spent with them. One last thing, rather than saying at least they aren't suffering anymore, again, we mean well by saying things like this. Maybe you can go along the lines of they will always be a part of you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I like that. I think the key thing that I think we want to tell everybody is that there probably isn't a clear-cut right and wrong way of what to say. Just like grief itself, there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and we're going to get into that in a second. But, it's different for everybody. So what you might say might be the exact same thing that they need to hear, because you know that person and you love that person and you know what's going to comfort them. But I know for myself, and like Pauline said, a lot of times I have no idea what to say. And so I struggle with maybe even reaching out sometimes, because I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Well, that in itself is not going to be helpful. So, maybe rephrasing some of the things that we would have normally said. So maybe this is going to start you thinking about how can we say things differently? Yeah. So we can talk about grief without talking about the 5 stages of it, right? So Elisabeth Kübler-Ross has 5 stages of grief. And I'm going to say this very loosely, very fluid. So it's not like a stair step, or it's not like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, even though they are all numbered for our purposes of our brain. We like having things numbered, and Pauline and I like things in 5s, don't we, Pauline? But this is very fluid. So it's not like, okay, step 1, then step 2, you might recircle around again to the different phases. But anyway, so the first one is shock and denial. So that's coming into the reality of what just happened. You can go numb. You can be like, that didn't happen. Denial, obviously, like, no, they didn't just die last night. That it couldn't have happened. So shock and denial is one of them. The next one's anger. It could be the thought of like, life's not fair. Why did that happen to them? Why do bad things happen to good people type of mentality? A lot of times people question the higher power, like, why did God do this? Why did God punish them? Why did God take them? And kind of blame God or other higher power. Bargaining. So you make a deal. So speaking of that, so a lot of people make a deal with God or the universe saying, if you do this, I'll do that. Guilt is brought on by the what if. So what if I would have called them last night? What if I would have taken them to the doctor? Or what if I, didn't get in the car and go through that stoplight or whatever. I mean, we can play what ifs all day long, but that is the bargaining phase stage. Next one, depression, which makes total sense. That's feelings of emptiness, hopelessness. So maybe some people have some suicidal ideations. Maybe like, I want to be with that person right now. And so you might start thinking about ending your own life. Acceptance. So that's number 5. But acceptance is coming to terms with a new reality of the loss of that person, or that breakup, or loss of a job, or the prognosis of an illness. This is where you adjust and then readjust. So those are the 5, but there is a number 6. So David Kessler, who worked really closely with Elisabeth Ross, came up with number 6. And number 6 is finding meaning, and I really like that. And that's when I've been doing therapy, I've been trying to focus more on that, probably because I just had this training, but I'm finding meaning. And he talks about it's a roadmap to remember those who have died. And so focus on the love versus the pain, kind of like what you talked about earlier, Pauline. So let's focus on the good parts about that, honoring that person, remembering that person, maybe getting out a photo album or pulling up photos off your phone and being like, remember when we did this? Or, just recalling all the good stuff. So just honoring those who have gone away, via love. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
Same.
Yeah. So Pauline, what about symptoms of grief? What can people look out for?
What can people look out for? And I really like that you said like this process is very fluid, and that speaks to us as human beings. We're not linear creatures. Like we're going to feel, our emotions make us who we are. That's the essence. So we're going to feel different things. That means that we're going to function and move about in life day to day differently because we're feeling certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so some symptoms to look out for, which is the one that's very obvious, is crying. Any given moment, you're going to have crying spells. Difficulty sleeping, questioning the purpose of life, or even your spiritual beliefs. And as Tammy talked about the stages of grief, that's, the bargaining, that's the anger piece that's coming out right there. Feelings of detachment, withdrawing, isolating from friends, from family, maybe not going to work, not socializing like you were before. This is your process. You're going to worry. You're going to experience symptoms of anxiety, frustration, guilt. And guilt is where you're taking responsibility for certain things. I didn't do this. What if I had done that? Fatigue, when we worry, when we are frustrated or feeling like intense emotions, that's going to lead to fatigue at some point. Anger, loss of appetite, aches and pains, stress, suicidal thoughts. Another thing to consider is behavior. So we can have reckless behavior in the form of like maybe driving fast, just doing things that are scary, gambling, having unprotected sex and different things like that. This is part of the process. Maybe excessive use of drugs and alcohol, or you just begin to start using things like that, which you weren't before. But this is how you are coping with these different, with the loss that you've experienced.
Absolutely. I like that you added at the very end, those reckless behaviors, because a lot of times people want to numb those feelings. And so by doing so, you can engage in other reckless activity or increase your alcohol intake or drug intake. And so that's a way people try to cope with things when they are out of their control. But yeah, there's a definite red flags to look for. So we talked a little bit about that. So treatment of grief, it really could be just simple as talking to somebody or having an open dialogue like Pauline and they're having. Just talk to somebody, open up about somebody, what you're struggling with. It can also look like support groups, bereavement groups, individual counseling. We're going to encourage counseling and therapy, but that's not for everybody, and we 100% know that. So, but that is an option if you are struggling, just going and chatting with somebody about it. And of course, medications. And we don't talk a whole lot about medications on this YouTube channel, but medications definitely help you out if needed. So, Pauline, what about like talking about our own, because you talked a little bit about like you feel about it when people bring it up in therapy session, but have you personally been affected by grief or loss that we can share with everybody else out there?
I can share, and I'm gonna bring mine more to like recently, just because I don't want to go back in time because we don't have that kind of time. Um, but more recently in January, I lost a friend that I reconnected with because I got back on social media, which is very interesting. So I definitely had those thoughts of, well, what if I never got off social media? I would still be talking to this person. But what I did when I got this news was I didn't say anything. I got quiet about it. I definitely felt my anger and frustration, but didn't say anything. And I'm very good at just keeping things to myself. There's a difference between being secretive and being private. And I'm very private, and that can be dangerous for me, especially for loss. And so I didn't say anything and just stuffed it. And at some point, when you stuff things, it's gonna come out in some way. And I kept myself busy, and I got overwhelmed and had a breakdown. And that breakdown felt good, I have to say. It felt like a release. And another one that I'm actually currently going through, this person has not passed away, but that's where things are going. And so I'm currently mourning this person, grieving them, even though they're still alive. But that's just my process. They recently found out that they have a certain amount of time to live, and I want to see them. I want to spend more time with them, but also respecting their boundaries, their wishes, and I'm doing my own work in what I know. So I'm glad that they reached out and told me like, hey, this is what is going to happen, and I get to decide on how I get to process it. And right now, just going through these different methods for me is working. So that's my situation and what I've been through with grief and loss, and going through it currently as we speak.
Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that. I know it's hard to talk about sensitive topics like this without having all the feels, right?
All the feels.
Yeah. Yeah. So
what about you, friend?
Yeah. So as you were talking, you talked about stifling. I remember like a lot of times in therapy, I'll use my own thing as an example. So don't do what I did. So my dad died about 10 years ago. It was actually his anniversary was just the other day of his 10 years. And, you know, just like you said, anniversaries come up, you start thinking about these things. But my dad died, and I was also going through a lot of other losses. I was losing a house. I lost a marriage. I was learning how to be a single mom. I added a job to already 2 jobs that I had. So I didn't have time. I didn't have time to grieve. I didn't have time to I took no bereavement time off. I went to the funeral, and the next day I just lost my dad. And the next day I was at work, and not only working 1, but 3 jobs. It was awful. But I just kept working. So I stifled it that way. But it does come around, so you can only stifle it for so long. The analogy I use in therapy is like a beach ball. We have a beach ball, we're trying to like hold it underwater. I don't know if you've ever done that as a kid, Pauline, or maybe you did that last week when you were somewhere.
As an adult.
As an adult. But you have a beach ball, and you're trying to like stifle it and push it underwater, and you sit on you put your elbow on it, you lay on it, and you might be successful for a teeny tiny bit, but eventually that beach ball is going to pop out of the water out of nowhere, right? Grief is like that. If we don't deal with it, it's going to pop up out of nowhere, and it's going to hit us in the face. It's going to come out between our legs and our arms, and it's awful, but your body has to release it somehow. So my suggestion to you is to not wait for years on end to grieve, that you need to do it while you're going through it. So I did not. I learned the hard way. I really did. But now I use it all the time in examples. So death is just so hard, Pauline. It's just, yeah, it's a tough.
Death is hard. Losing things is hard, because what we try to do, I think what makes it difficult is trying to make sense of it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of it, especially when kids, the loss of children, loss of babies, I think that's a very difficult thing to try to fathom, like how, and of course, loss of different, situations, divorce, relationships, friendships too. Trying to make sense of it, it makes it very much difficult, but the outcome, finding meaning. I'm very big into finding meaning in things. And it's not my way of it's not my denial pattern by any means. It's more of how I heal in, okay, yes, this happened. I've accepted it. I don't like it by any means. However, this is the meaning I'm creating out of it, because our brain as human beings needs to make sense of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when if we don't make sense of things, then that probably can stifle the whole grieving process. Like I said, there's those 5-6 stages, but if we don't pay the attention, it could last a lot longer than what we want it to. So
Right.
I like that you said that. So thank you so much for the person who mentioned that they wanted us to talk about this. I appreciate
Yes.
that. If you have something you want us to chat about, please, please, please let us know in the comments below, or find our social medias or reach out to us that way. You talk, we listen. So if you're grieving, let us know. If there's something that's been helpful to you, put it in the comments below. We are all in this together. We love having a supportive community and loving each other. So please share the love if something's worked for you. Or maybe if you're struggling with something, maybe somebody else can pop in there and say, hey, I don't know if this is going to work for you, but this is what worked for me. We're all different.
Sure.
We all have different experiences, but let's just come together and create this loving community, because we've all have been through it, or will be going through it, or love somebody who is going through it. So let's just be in this together. Hit like and subscribe if you like our stuff. We appreciate you, our new and existing subscribers. We love it. Remember to come back next week, as we'll have new content. And remember, the best is yet to come. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.